Hi, and welcome to Real Trail Talk. I am Donovan D'Souza from The Long Ways Better.
And I'm Mark Pybus from The Life of Pi. Welcome to episode 76. We are reunited. It's been a while and almost a month since our last recording.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be. We kind of both got to the time and went, oh no, we have not planned this well.
Yeah.
We had a few, issues that prevented us from recording another episode. And then we had lockdown just a couple of days ago from when we recorded.
Yeah.
So that, again, meant we were, we had planned to record earlier and it didn't happen. But, we're back. So hopefully, touch wood, we can keep recording.
Yeah. And the reason why this episode is so delayed is we had our own adventures. So
yeah,
I think this is the Mark and Don Easter Adventure Pod. We'll just talk about our various trips that we took.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll start with you because yours was a little smaller.
Yeah, yes, quite a bit smaller.
But nonetheless, still very adventurous. You went up north to
Yep.
tick something off your bucket list.
Yeah, two things off the Little Donny bucket list.
Yeah.
The first one was the whale sharks at Ningaloo.
That's cool because I'm hoping to do that middle of the year as well.
Yep.
And your photos, despite some difficulties that you had,
so frustrating.
Looked very good.
Yeah, so I got a photograph of the whale sharks. The problem that I had was that my camera case, I have an underwater camera case, and it has all these buttons that can then hit the buttons on the inside. And what it kept doing was, as I was jumping into the water, it was hitting the flash button.
Oh, no.
So the flash inside was popping up, and then it was trying to take the photo going, oh, there's a flash as well.
Yeah.
And it stuffed up so many times. And there's one, I showed you that photo, that would have been just absolutely perfect, of this whale shark on a sort of 45-degree angle coming towards me. And it's out of focus because of the flash.
Yeah.
So annoyed. But I did get some at the end of it. I think we were both extraordinarily lucky and extraordinarily unlucky in that we got to see one, which is great.
Yeah.
But this particular one was super fast. So it was really difficult. But it was, within, a meter from the surface.
Yeah.
The previous 2 days, they were looking at 5-meter depth. So that would have been...
Yeah, that's kind of tough. You dive down, you're there for a couple of seconds if you're not a seasoned free diver, and then you've got to go back up again.
Yeah, so... I was really happy. It was great to tick it off, but it was also frustrating that the camera issues happened. But I think, I got to swim with it 6 times.
Yeah.
You can't complain, and it is as magical as, people make it out to be.
So do you want to share which company you went with and kind of the process of how you get out there to swim with them?
So we went with Coral Bay Eco Tours. So we stayed in Coral Bay, obviously, and they took us out. We used them before to do the manta ray tour, and they're a really good group. They really are professional. They know what they're doing, and also the cool thing about that is they take you out to other sites as well, so you get to snorkel, which was just as well, because the time that we went, I would not recommend anyone to go in April, to be honest. The coral spawning was happening, and the visibility was terrible a lot of the time.
The water was a bit jizzy, was it?
Very much so. It was just... so the way I see it was, I'm glad that we went because of the whale sharks, but we were there in January, and that was way better. And also January was way quieter as well. So it was much busier. The quality of the shore-based snorkeling was not as good, but it was worth it just to do the whale sharks. So the first day we got there and we went out to Coral Bay itself, to Bills Bay, and you just, had 1 meter visibility.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really bad. The good thing was when they took us out further to some of the stuff that's, it's not far from the shore, but it's not swimmable.
Yeah.
Taking us out to those places, we had a bit better visibility, but still not what we had in January, where it was just crystal clear. So, very good to do it, but I would probably say, if you can, choose another time other than April if it's going to be close to spawning.
Unless you really want to see the spawning.
Yeah, but it's not that exciting.
Yeah, it's a nighttime thing as well, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
all at once at night.
And, like, really, I feel, if you give me a choice between seeing that or being able to go out and see, some turtles swimming and some fish swimming, I'd much rather that. So, I mean, I had some okay swims, and I had to, I think, put it into perspective of, okay, so this is not one where I'm going to get some good photographs.
Yeah.
This is just one that I'm going to just have some fun, swim around, see some stuff. Like, went to oyster stacks, saw some stingrays, saw some turtles, saw heaps of fish. It's still better than any snorkeling you're going to get in Perth area.
Yeah. I kind of have that trouble as well when you got to take off your blogging hat and be like, I'm just here to enjoy it. I don't need to add content to the website or do this or that.
Yeah.
And just live in the moment rather than constantly think about
that's right
angles and photos and stories. And
I was there in January, so I can't complain. It wasn't like, it was like, oh, it'll be years before I'll be back, and it's been years since I was last here.
Yeah.
It was just a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So another kind of bucket list thing that little Donnie wanted to tick off was a trip out to Mount Augustus, which is not a short drive
no.
from either Perth or Coral Bay. So what was the logistics involved with that?
Okay, so the big challenge here was that because of the heavy rains that they had at the start of the year, a lot of the roads into Mount Augustus had been damaged, and I couldn't get straight answers from people as to how clear the roads were. So I knew that the Shire of Upper Gascoyne had their website, and they said these roads are clear, and the clearest way that I could see was coming from the south via Gascoyne Junction. The problem with that was if you're in Coral Bay and you need to go that way, Google Maps said like 10 hours of driving.
Wow.
It wasn't quite that, because Google Maps reckons that on gravel you're doing 60 Ks.
Yeah, I've noticed they dampened that down a little.
Yeah, and we weren't doing 60 Ks. But still took a bloody long time. So there is another way to get there, which is if you went through the north, there's a road that links up from one of the roadhouses across, and that would have taken at least 2 or 3 hours off the trip. But the problem with that was we would have to get to a river crossing that was only maybe an hour and a half from Mount Augustus. If that was impossible, we would then have to double back all the way around, and we just did not want to try that.
Yeah.
So we just thought, okay, well, let's just cut our losses. We'll go the long way around.
Because it's better.
It is. So we went through Gascoyne Junction, fueled up. Our car had a warning light that went on, and we went, uh-oh.
Yeah.
But luckily, we realized what it was our car was covered in these massive bugs. Because I don't know, I think it's because of the water. They must have had like a mass plague of locusts. The front of our car was covered, and we got a brush out, scrubbed off the radiator, which was just covered in bugs. And then suddenly the light was off. So I think that's what it was. It must have been some issue like that. But that's not a cool thing when you're heading on 300 kilometers of unsealed roads in the middle of nowhere, where there's hardly any traffic
in the heat,
in 38-degree heat. So that was a bit unnerving, but we pressed on, and the drive was awesome though. I think there's just something spectacular about that outback scenery, and as much as you see a bit of that in Cape Range when you're heading in, this felt a lot more like the Pilbara outback, where it's that just endless, red soil,
just spinifex everywhere.
And then these these peaks that were appearing in the desert, and it was just stunning. There's just something really special about it, and it's something I hadn't seen since doing the trip to Karajini. So that was, fantastic. And as you approach and you see these little mountains, and then you go, oh, maybe that's Mount Augustus, but no, it's not. And you go around it, and then you see Mount Augustus, and it is massive, absolutely massive. And then when we got there, I was just really grateful that we made it to the Mount Augustus tourist park. Facilities are pretty good there. It's the middle of nowhere, so I think some people have said, "Oh, the accommodation's crap," but
what do you expect?
Exactly, what do you expect? And the main thing was the beds were comfortable, and it was cool. Yes, it was a small room that was basically just two beds, aircon, shared shower facilities because we couldn't get one of the other ensuite rooms. But hey, it was actually more comfortable a bed than some of the beds we had at other places along the trip.
And adult Don's always a fan when there's aircon involved.
It was so stinking hot. It was absolutely horrible how hot it was. And not just 38 is the temperature, but the heat from the ground is also just just slaps you in the face with heat. And then just locusts everywhere, like the most ridiculous amount of grasshoppers I've ever seen, and different varieties. Like I saw maybe 10 different varieties of grasshopper. Like the most biodiverse area for grasshoppers I've ever seen. But once we were there, it was good. We settled in, and then the next day we did the mountain.
So it's not a short climb, is it, up to the top?
No, it's not, because it's twice the size, not in terms of height, but it's twice the size of Uluru. But luckily the ascent is really all... so you start in the southwestern corner, which is good because the sun's coming from the east and traveling around north, so you're in the shade for a lot of it. Wouldn't recommend doing it in April because it was really hot, and we had to start very early. So we got up at 3:50 in the morning.
Wow.
We got up, we had a little snack to eat, brushed our teeth, drove out to the start. We were there at 4:30 at the bottom at the car park of the summit. And then we were done by 9:45, and I wouldn't have started any later. And we were the only people who did it that day because no one else came after us, and you wouldn't want to start any later than we started. But it was fantastic. It's a really good walk. I actually think it's better than Mount Bruce as a mountain walk. The reason I'd say that is that it's maybe a little bit easier for a lot of reward. Plus, then the way out is really cool because you can go a different way out. So I really enjoyed that. And I think the fact is, it's divided into 4 sections. There's one bit which is the first 3Ks, which is flat, fairly easy. Then you've got this just really steep section that goes on for ages. Then it's flat again across the top, and then a very short 300-meter scramble to the summit. And just that, I think that the fact that it was quite easy. Even Alyssa was taking some medication that made her really nauseous, and she hadn't really done anything like this for a while, and just started throwing up. So she said, look, I can't do this anymore. So she stopped. But she said herself, look, I'd love to come back actually, because this wasn't that hard. And it was quite spectacular going up as much as she did. And it's a shame that she didn't get to go all the way, because that bit across the top was really nice with spin effects, just feels of spin effects. And then you get to that scramble, and there's this massive summit cairn that the ranger brought up brick by brick, basically. And they've got a little box where they've got a notebook you can sign into, and some bottles of water, because people don't carry enough water and die on this trail.
I suppose that's an important safety tip.
Definitely.
can give is always have a lot more water than what you expect to drink.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's not just that you drink water. So what I had in my bag, so I was really freaked out that we were going to actually die on here because, people have died, and, it did feel really hot the previous day. I actually had a shirt that I drenched in water in the bathroom before we left in my bag to put on if it got really hot at the end, because a lot of it is not just dehydration but overheating.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing. When we left, we went through the gully track, and the gully track is definitely worth doing. I wouldn't do it from the top in April because there's a way that you can go from the gully track from the summit all the way down, but it would take you a lot longer going down. So we did it from this halfway point, and it takes you to this kind of a gorge area where there's pools of water, at least when we did it.
Yeah.
And that takes you out through the gully, and really spectacular through there. But we could definitely feel towards the end through the gully, because the gully is like an oven.
Yeah.
Not good. Wouldn't want to be there any later in the day. And even with me hydrating properly, I had an awful headache when we got back to the accommodation, and I just slept because I was dehydrated, tired, and just absolutely just smashed by it.
So how long's the walk up and back, including the gully track?
They say 6 to 8 hours, but we did that in 5 and a bit, and that was including Alyssa struggling early on, and us going through the gully track, which is much slower. Like we were like, gee, this feels. They say it's the same length, but it felt like maybe 50% longer because of having to scramble down the gully. So it's not a long time, but I think they say to allow 8 for people who are slower.
Yeah.
And if you spent a long time at the summit, like they've got a picnic table, people have a meal up there. But I'd say if you're gonna go in July when it's much safer. Yeah. Because I would have liked to have taken it a bit slower and enjoyed the full experience, but I was basically rushing. So yeah, I'd say don't go in April. Don't go to Ningaloo in April.
Don't do what Don did.
Don't do Mount Augustus.
But worth the drive out, though, you'd say?
Oh, definitely. We would go again because it really is lovely. And we thought of you the nighttime because you looked up in the sky and, it's just that desert sky, just no light pollution.
Yeah.
Everything, you can see the Milky Way. It looks like a long exposure photograph, but without the long exposure.
Yeah, because a lot of around Perth when I'm doing it, I can make out the faint line. And I was like, well, there's the Milky Way, but as you say, out in the desert, it's a lot clearer. And WA is known for its dark skies.
Yeah. The last time I saw it that good was New Year's Day, 2020, when I was at Tongariro and I couldn't sleep. I walked outside. I was like, oh wow. So that also felt really cool to have that sort of flashback to that trip, which was in the before times. Yeah.
So on the way back, you didn't just drive straight home though. You did a bit of a detour to Honeycomb Gorge.
Yeah. So we had a one-stage plan to stay at Gascoyne Junction and actually explore Kennedy Range properly, but due to all the stuffing around, we thought we weren't going to be able to go to Kennedy Range because the road was actually closed until quite recently. But we were able to push on through there's another road that you can take that takes you via Kennedy, and it's excellent. It's really spectacular, and we're like, no one talks about this place. It looks like a small version of Utah. It's got this,
Ooh, nice.
these sort of cliffs that are,
What are they called? Mesas?
Yeah, it's like a mesa. Yeah. Just absolutely spectacular and middle of nowhere and very different because it's nothing like Augustus or nothing like the Hammersleys.
Yeah, which are very rounded in shape just because they're so ancient. So I wonder what caused these to look like the way they are.
I don't know, but it's it's really cool. And Honeycomb Gorge is like a really short walk. You know me, like I don't ride up short walks. So I'm like, this is not a hike.
Yeah.
But I had to because it was just...
You've driven so long.
Yeah. It was really beautiful. It's just this area where water falls from this waterfall in summer, and it's created these little holes in the wall.
Hence the name, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yeah. So very cool. Worth going. I would love to come back again. I'd say July. Because, there were some people camping, and I was like, how do you sleep? You'll just be so hot every day that you're here.
And then you also stopped via Kalbarri to check out the new Skywalk.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, was in the news for all the wrong reasons. Not the Skywalk, but the town.
Yeah, so, the Skywalk has, I guess, been in the news for good reasons. That, it's been an attraction that's been really popular. And it's, I think we can be a bit cynical about how they've overplayed it in the tourism.
And overpaid for it.
Yeah. But when you're there, you can't really argue with how well made the structure is and how good the way they've presented it and the interpretation stuff they've got there. A lot of indigenous interpretation, the scientific stuff that talks about, how it was formed, they've got a cafe, a lot of things like that. So very, very good in terms of, I guess, how they've created an experience that people can get. But yeah, the thing that was, I guess, a bit worrying was we were there, and when that night we had a leave now warning from emergency services.
Yeah.
And this was the Friday night before the cyclone hit.
Yeah.
So we left Saturday morning, and Sunday evening the town was basically 70% of the buildings were damaged or destroyed by the cyclone.
Very, very sad for that town, because history suggests that cyclones don't usually come that far south.
Yeah.
Not with that ferocity anyway, and for 70% of that town to be wiped out is a huge deal.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy task to rebuild a town like Kalbarri.
No, and also it's at a terrible time because of the housing boom, because everyone's come home from overseas now, and so houses are being built, and there's not enough labor to build back the houses.
And they're coming into peak tourist season as well, which is when they're the busiest.
Yeah, it's really sad. The hotel that we always stay at, a place called Kalbarri Palm Resort, because it has this Kendone sign, and we always think of it as our home in Kalbarri when we're there, and they're closed, and they said they really hope to welcome people back when they reopen, but they don't know when.
Yeah, very, very sad for the town, and we hope that gets on its feet very quickly.
Yeah, we've talked about doing a walk through there, through the gorges at some stage in the future, so hopefully, we'll be there and we'll get out there again. And I really do recommend people go, because I love Kalbarri. It's one of my favorite national parks in WA. So once they're back in, I think if everyone can go, definitely do it.
Yeah, because apart from the Kimberley and a little bit of the Pilbara, that's the last bit of WA I need to check off for the website is Kalbarri and up the Coral Coast there. So looking forward to supporting them maybe next year, I think.
And it's not just the national park. The food is really good there. They're a really good tourist town that's well set up. So definitely, go and support the businesses once they reopen. So on to you, Mark.
Yes.
You've got a way longer trip.
Yeah, it was 2.5 weeks.
Yeah,
and jokingly, because it was a trip with Karis and her aunt and uncle, Helen and Candy. They live in Victoria. They were going to drive over with their kayaks, and we were going to meet them there and do a self-drive holiday, kind of a loop of the West Coast and back from Hobart. And jokingly, I'd filled in Hal's spreadsheet of where we were staying with all these walks, and I didn't seriously think we were going to get through all of them.
Yeah.
But when you're out on the West Coast, there's really not much to do apart from hike and visit these wilderness areas. So
you wrote, what, 40 walks?
No, so the list was, 20 something long, and I have 27 posts now to write up.
Because I remember when you were telling me, and I was like, You're crazy. I don't think you would be able to get that many done.
I know. And like when I wrote, I was like, I'm not going to do this because we'll have like, we went on cruises some days. We had a railway experiences. Like just the fact of driving between places was an issue.
Yep.
And I really only missed out on one hike that I wanted to do. And that was only because we really poorly planned and didn't realize there was a car ferry at Corinna that we had to go on. But even then, I don't think I'd be able to do it. I would have had to sacrifice one hike that turned out to be pretty good. But yeah, so over to Tassie. Luckily, COVID didn't hit and we were allowed over. Arrived in Hobart and it was 32 degrees. It was so weird. It was April.
That's
start of
horrible.
April. It was the hottest April day they've had on record.
Yeah.
And the Karras's family, who we stayed with for a couple of nights, like blasting the aircon. This was unheard of, and I was just like, "This is fantastic weather. Why can't I get it out?"
But I feel like 32 is awful in Hobart compared to like even worse than Perth.
It wasn't bad though. That's the thing. Like it was just felt normal because we'd had such a hot-ish summer that was quite humid. So I was kind of used to it.
But I would have hated it.
You would have hated it because you blast your aircon all year except for a couple of months in winter. But the way we planned is we could save a couple of $100 by picking up the hire car on the Sunday, and we arrived on the Friday night. So I didn't have a car for the Saturday, and I really wanted to get out. So Kara's sister lives in Lena Valley, which is at the base of Mount Wellington. So I was like, cool, I'll just go for a walk from the house, and I found a rivulet. I was like, I'll just follow this uphill, and I ended up like walking for it over an hour, and I was like, this is actually pretty cool that you can just kind of begin a walk from the suburbs up to Mount Wellington. I didn't make it to the summit, like nowhere near, but it was still cool that there were walking trails nearby. And then on the Sunday we actually got going properly, so I picked up the car, and Mount Field National Park was our first stop, which I wasn't too worried about. Like I'd already visited 2.5 years ago. So I knew the area. I'd planned a few walks that I'd already done. And one of those was Lady Barron, which you've also done. Very cool circuit. I got to see it with more water this time, which is odd because it was autumn rather than spring in my last visit.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think autumn's a really good time to visit.
It is. Probably we're a bit late in autumn. I would prefer maybe a month or two earlier. But Mount Field, known for the Fagus on the Tyne Shelf Circus, that was one of the reasons I was kind of keen to head out there. But it was just nice, just like walking just for the fun of it. Because Karis was like, are you going to do this one up? I was like, already done it, mate. So I wasn't worried that... I didn't take as many photos. The only really ones I wanted was the waterfalls because I didn't really photograph Russell Falls that well. So I did that. And then the big one that I wanted to do was Mount Field West, which is out in there from Lake Dobson and is the tallest point in the park and takes you through some pretty cool scenery. So from the Tyne Shelf, you can see the Rodway Range and Cake Hole, and I always thought it'd be cool to go up and visit those. And Mount Field West takes you along the Rodway Range, and it is just ridiculously like just pretty the whole way around. Like it's climbing, and then you're going through these boulder fields, pretty similar to Toolburn up, and then you're up and down, and yeah, the scenery is amazing. And you've got all these tarns, mountains in the distance, these huge valleys that have been carved by the glaciers. And I didn't get that great of weather. Like it was pretty misty and cloudy, and I couldn't see anything for most of the hike. But then I got to like the plateau leading towards the summit, and it kind of cleared a little bit. And then as I got to the summit, within a minute, it just completely cleared. And like there's just these dolerite spires everywhere. It's really dramatic country, and like because it's Tassie, like it feels wild because you can't see roads or highways or anything like that unless you really, really squint.
Yeah,
and like that's like the edge of Mount Field and the wilderness there.
That's something I really find in Tassie that is spectacular is that there's a sense of like there's nothing beyond the national park.
Yeah.
Which you don't really get in WA. I mean, I think you do get that to a degree in the Pilbara, but not to the same extent, because you still see roads in the Pilbara.
Yeah, and mines.
Yeah.
So that was cool, but that was probably one of the toughest day hikes I've ever done, because you're either up or you're down. Always looking where your footing is, mud as well, and like, you know how I hate walking on moss. The plateau bit leading to Mount West, it just has so many cushion plants, and sometimes there's no option but to walk on them. I wish they had boardwalk here. But yeah,
your soul must have just been like breaking.
It was. But yeah, ridiculously pretty up there, and a lot of people out, because it was Easter, up there camping. So you can camp along some of the tarns up there. And funny enough, like I was hiking back and there's this couple, and I passed the guy and he had his big pack on. I was like, oh yeah, they're going out camping. And then the wife appeared around the corner and she had the baby strapped to the front. I was like, oh, you are brave, because it's not going to be warm out there tonight and you're camping in a tent with a baby in the wilderness.
That's the Tasmanian way, mate.
That's Tassie. So.
Like in WA, they'd be, oh, it's too dangerous. Over there, like, you know, we saw people do the overland with a baby. And, you know.
But I figure it's probably easier than like having a toddler.
Yeah.
A toddler, like, they're heavy.
Yeah.
And they complain a lot.
One of our friends has one of those, you know, the hiking packs with the seat.
The kids, yeah.
And they said, you know, there's like this perfect age where you can go and do a hike with them, and then they get too heavy and then they're very slow and difficult to drag along.
Yeah, I feel like this kid was that right age. And then around Mount Field, what else did I do? I did Russell Falls hike as a hike, because last time I was like, it's only 1.5 kilometers. I'm above that. But I did the full loop, and the night before actually doing that, I'd come back from a place called the Needles, which is very, very lovely hike, bit of a drive out from Mount Field. And I was like, come on, Karis, let's go to the falls. I want to photograph them properly with the long exposure and everything. We were doing that, and then all of a sudden a lyrebird appears at the base of the falls, and we're watching that for a little bit, and it's flicking like bits of moss into the water, and we're like, hey, don't do that. And then it flicked a bit, but it made too big a splash, and Karis is like, hang on, that's not right. And that was a platypus.
Oh!
So it was us and another couple there, and they're like, did you see that? We're like, yeah, we saw it. And I was like frantically trying to take photos of this thing, but it was like 5:30. It was in the forest. It was getting dark. And I've got like some blurry photos of what looks like a platypus, but not really.
Yeah.
But like you could see it quite clearly. So I was quite happy just to watch it like that. And then it just disappeared.
So I similarly got a tail of a dingo walking away. Yeah. It crossed the road in Cape Range, and I didn't have the camera. Normally I have the camera like in next to me, and I was frantically running and it was too late.
I mean, it's long as you saw it, because we had a similar experience a couple of days later driving out to Lake Pedder. We're just along this winding road, and it's just like, stop. There's a wombat in the middle of the road, and it's like, quick, but my camera was on the back seat, so we kind of pulled over in a safe spot. By the time I got out and had the camera ready, the wombat had scurried off, and I was like, I'm not going to get a photo of this, but we saw one. So
did you see an echidna?
No.
What?
No.
I see them all the time in Tassie.
Yeah, I know. And I've seen them in Tassie before, but I don't know. It was just every time it was the right kind of space for it, just didn't appear, or it was way too cold. But
I think it's just they know it's you.
No, maybe they knew Karis was with me, because the first time I saw one, it was clearly on the path, and she'll hate me again for bringing this up again. But yeah, we saw it, and there's this family like crouched down looking at it, and she like runs up and she's like, echidna! Pointing at it. I'm like, yes, I saw it, and now it's running off into the bush because you scared it. So I'm going to blame it on her. And
okay.
Yeah. That's the reason why we didn't see an echidna. But we saw a platypus and a lyrebird, which they're introduced. I'm not as keen on seeing one. I'd seen one before, so not a big deal. But then from Mount Field, we went off to Lake Pedder, which Candy and Hal were really interested in seeing because Candy had actually gone to the protests at Lake Pedder when it was being dammed, and she was quite involved with that, so she wanted to kind of see what it was now, and also they're kind of big kayaking fans, so they drag their kayaks out for a good couple of paddles. But there's really not much at Lake Pedder. There's a kind of, it's like a old recreation camp, which is the Wilderness Lodge, but like the walls are so thin where we were staying you could hear like quite clearly everyone around you. But the lodge was pretty cool. The food was good. I had one of the best pies I've ever had.
Oh.
It was a root vegetable pie with an onion gravy, and it was all super fantastic. But yeah, I mean, as I said, there's not much to do out there, but I did end up doing a place called Mount Sprent, which I'd kind of eyed off, but then was waiting for the right weather, and came towards like the end of that stay. I was like, I haven't done it. I kind of regret not going earlier. But then the weather cleared up. I was like, cool, I'm going. And it was just a beautiful way just to see the whole lake area, because you can see 360 degrees. I got great weather the whole way up, and you can see Lake Gordon, Lake Pedder, and just all like the vastness of what would have been there originally if you just cancel out some of the lakes.
Yeah.
And heading to Gordon Dam is a good kind of indication of what was there before, because Gordon Dam, like, it's this huge, like, narrow gorge, and it's actually like not bell-shaped, but it's bell-shaped and then it curves again, and it's holding in all this water, and the valley is so steep, like you can't imagine anything like that in Australia exists outside of maybe like the Blue Mountains. But it's crazy to think what would have been there without all the hydro stuff.
Yeah, it's always that tricky thing with the hydro stuff, because obviously it's destroyed some of the nature, but then they're 100% renewable, and it's like this sort of balancing act that's hard to gauge.
Apparently they were like enemy number one in Tasmania for decades and decades, and now it's kind of swinging to like, well, it's not so bad, like we wish it didn't happen. Yeah. And like had they have gone full steam ahead, a lot worse would have happened. They would have dammed a lot more like wilderness areas, but because of the protests and the Greens movement, they kind of compromised on just a couple of dams.
Yeah, like I've visited the Franklin, and it's beautiful, but you wouldn't want to see it destroyed. And the same thing with the ones that have been made, but then it's just this, it's just so difficult to know the right thing to do, because would they have still had coal fire if they didn't have hydro?
Yeah, and like to the uninformed tourist, like if you didn't know the dams were there, you'd be like, oh cool, because they do have natural alpine lakes. You just think, oh wow, what a great area this is, but once you know the history, you're kind of like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about this at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lake Pedder was actually pretty cool. And then we went into the bad weather, so we had to backtrack because we were heading to Lake Sinclair next, so I had to go back to Mount Field and then drive up towards Lake Sinclair. And I managed to get in a hike at a place called Tassie Falls, which was just kind of like one of those weird things in Tassie where like it's a trail of decent length. It was about 3 or 4 kilometers, but like there's no information really online about it. We drove to the place, there was no signs. I was gonna not do it because like the start is literally over a piping for some hydro and it felt like I was breaking the law to like cross that area, but then as soon as I was in the forest, I was like, oh, there's a sign for Tassie Falls, and it was just like, I don't know, it's just a weird thing. Kara stayed in the car because it was raining, so I was kind of rushing, but I was like, this is just beautiful, like ferns everywhere, beautiful trees, it goes down to a small waterfall. This would be like more popular than Whistlepipe Gully if it existed near Perth, and this is just like a run-of-the-mill track in Tassie. Yeah,
that's the thing that I always find amazing over there. It's like things that are not talked about, unimportant to them. It's like second or third tier. Yeah, here would be like, oh my god, this is the best thing.
If you can take your dog there, it'd be like number one everywhere. But arrived at Lake Sinclair after driving through what I called was sleet, but Karis was like, no, that has to be snow. It was kind of like just the first little bits of snow, and it kind of melted as soon as they hit the ground. But then we got to Lake Sinclair and we're like, oh no, this is snow.
Yep.
And
That's awesome.
cold snap came through Tassie, and it was just amazing because I had not seen snow like properly since 1996.
Wow.
When we were in England, and before that in 94 when we were up in Thredbo. But like it's just that like magical like time, and like the lodge there feels like a proper like hiking lodge, even though it's not that user friendly. And then you just like watch the snow fall with a hot chocolate. The ground starts becoming white. The tables fill up with snow. And I was just like, yes, this is pretty cool. I did not expect this at all.
Yep.
But the downside was like we couldn't really see much of Lake Sinclair or the Mount Olympus or any of the mountains around. But we did get to hike in snow. So I wasn't going to actually hike on the snow day, but Hal was like, let's just do one of the smaller walks.
Yeah.
So we
You
rubbed
gotta
up.
do it.
Yeah, we were in our thermals, in our wet weather gear. We were drenched by the end, but it was so cool just to like walk in snow and just see like ferns with snow on them and like Aussie eucalypts and bank shears with snow on them. It was just such a juxtaposition that you wouldn't expect. It was kind of surreal, but yeah.
So did you do that, like the Aboriginal Heritage one?
No, we did the Platypus Bay walk, which, no platypus. I don't think even they would be out.
Yeah.
But so that was just cool just for the snow part. And then the next day, we did the Aboriginal Heritage walk in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I did the Shadow Lake circuit.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is about 15 Ks loop. And it like all the snow had melted at the lodge by then. I was like, oh, that's okay. It'll just be like a normal hike. And then I started descending and it's like snow. And then it was like walking through ankle deep and knee deep snow. I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, it took forever to do the hike because you're constantly like, is that mud? Is that snow? Is it ice? Like, is it a rock? So I really had to watch your step, but it was so cool. And finally got like views of the mountains in the area. I'm looking forward to editing up that one because I think I took maybe 12 or 1,300 photos for that hike. It's be something different.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
Yeah. Didn't get out for a paddle on Lake Sinclair, but I'll take that for the snow and the
Oh,
other
yeah,
hikes.
definitely.
We also didn't get to stay at Pump House Point because it was fully booked. And you can't actually visit there as a day visitor.
Really?
So they have
Actually, they
gates
did say
now.
that to us. Yeah.
But everyone at the visitor centre was like, you can walk along this rocky beach and they technically can't stop you because it's a national park, but they don't encourage people to do that. But you could kind of see it from the distance. It just... One day I'll stay there. Maybe when I finish the overland, I'll make sure to get in.
Yeah. I think now that they have a minimum stay, when we booked it, you could book like one night.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I was like, because you would have only stayed there the night you finished.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had the minimum stay, which is a bit disappointing.
Yeah, because it's 3 days now, 3 nights,
Yeah.
which is very expensive.
Yeah.
But it's an awesome hotel.
It's worth it. But the Lake Sinclair Wilderness Lodge is actually very well appointed. So the rooms are gas heated, comfy bed, king size bed, which was amazing. I didn't have a knee in my back the whole time. And just plenty of room to walk about. It's pretty cool. And then Lake Sinclair, we went on to Strawn. So the drive from Lake Sinclair to Strawn is absolutely epic. So it is one of the routes they use for Targa. And it's just winding, twisty roads. And luckily, I think they've purposely done this as short walks along the way. So you're not driving the 2 or 3 hours it takes to get to Strawn. So I did 5 walks that day. First one was a place called Franklin River Nature Trail, which is just very short, but lots of fungi. You get to the divergent point of the Surprise and Franklin Rivers, and it's just really cool just to hop out and explore. And then we did Donaghy's Hill, and that gave me a glimpse of Frenchman's Cap. And it was kind of that thing where when you're out and you see cool kids doing fun stuff during the holidays, you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that because I'm not dressed for it or whatever. It's kind of like that, passing Frenchman's Cap and being like, I know I'm not doing that. I'm kind of sad. But then this allowed me to kind of see it and be like, I'm going to do that one day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then a place called Nelson's Fall was next, which was really like probably one of the better waterfalls in Tassie, I'd say. Really popular trail, unfortunately. So I was kind of having difficulty getting in my long exposure shots. And then just kind of as you enter Queenstown, it changes from being like it feels very wilderness to there's lots of mining around here.
It feels like the Wild West.
Yeah, because they have the couple of towns that you pass through. I think was one of them called like Linda or something.
I think so.
And it's like, welcome to Linda. And there's like this abandoned building that has a cafe at the bottom. It's like cafe closed. It's like, thank you for visiting Linda. Yeah, there's just like mining everywhere. And I stopped in to do a short walk up to Horsetail Falls just to get some more content for the website and stretch my legs. It was okay. It was interesting because the rocks around there were very pink and brown, and it was just a stop. And then we finally made it to Strawn and had enough time to do Hogarth Falls, which is literally in the centre of town or just outside the centre of town, leaving a place called the People's Park. Which sounds very like Eastern Bloc communist, like People's Palace kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was fun. But again, popular in the afternoon, so long exposure. Like you've only got a small platform to view the waterfalls, and people kept coming down and like standing in front and taking their photos and their selfies. And they're like, "Oh, are we blocking your shot?" I'm like, "Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I'll get another one." And then like more tourists would come down. So I'm not sure how they're going to turn out, but it was a fun activity. And then around Strawn, we had a couple of days where it was like doing touristy type stuff. So we did a Gordon River cruise, takes you out to the ocean and then up the Gordon River. And I have mixed feelings about these things because it's like, yes, you'll get to see wilderness, but it's from a boat. And then it drops you off at this predetermined location where you can go on a nice little loop walk and be like, wow, wilderness, but it's not actually wilderness.
Yeah.
And the whole time, like, they're very proud of how they harvested all these Huon pines. And it's like, there's none left now because of you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And like it was funny because they're like, oh, we didn't want this area dammed because this is the history of our logging. Rather than like we don't want it damned for the environmental reasons.
Yeah.
And that's actually half of why it got preserved is because the loggers united with the environmentalists and they actually smuggled the protesters up and down the river.
Hey, so sometimes strange bedfellows make the best allies.
Okay, whatever works, but like it's just weird. Like we've cut down all of these pines. There's none left now that are any good.
Yeah.
And we want this area protected.
Yeah. This is a thing that you said to me, that you found that all the walks are either these very touristy walks or the arduous, hardcore southwest walks, and there's no in between. No,
there's a few, but like I feel like there's really nothing to do in southwest Tassie or western Tassie without going walking. So they kind of have to either gear to the very basic tourist. And then kind of people who are the more hardcore hikers have to find the other wilderness areas that are a bit harder. There's no like, this is difficult, and if you're not a seasoned hiker, like you probably can't do it. And the issue I think Tassie has is like most of those trails will be very, very muddy. So they kind of don't want to encourage people to go on them if they're just going to do the casual tourist thing and step around muddy bits rather than straight through them.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, Strawn's actually a very nice town. Like, as soon as I got there, I was like, I love this place. I actually wouldn't mind retiring to
It's
Strawn.
the loveliest place, yeah.
It just feels like it's not that far from Hobart when you think about it. It's like a 3 or 4 hour drive.
Yep.
And you think, like, Pemberton's that far away. But this feels like infinitely more further away than, like, Perth to Pemberton than Hobart to Strawn.
Well, it's on the edge of the wilderness, whereas
Yeah.
Pemberton's not really.
Yeah.
As much as they say Walpole Wilderness is a wilderness, it's not. Doesn't feel as wild.
Vehicle tracks everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, Strawn was really cool. Did also a little historic walk along the town just to stretch my legs for that day. And then the next day we were due to leave, and we went back to Queenstown and did the Wilderness Railway, and that was really cool. We did the Rack and Pin one, which is the really steep railway, and it takes you through some amazing places. It really makes you think like how hard life would have been building that railway, which was just there to transport ore out to the harbour. But it's now a really cool wilderness trail. Like, it's a wilderness railway experience. Like, it's probably more akin to going on the Hogwarts Express than anything I've seen. And the lady that was there, that was running like our cabin bit, was saying, yeah, a lot of people say that. It's quite cool. And I got to wear my Newt Scamander coat, the beast coat that you see.
Perfect. Yep.
So I dragged that all the way to Tassie just for that one day. And that was really cool. I recommend doing any. There's one that leaves from Strahan, and there's one that leaves from Queenstown. They meet up in the middle, but definitely do the one from Queenstown.
Cool.
And then from there, we were meant to drive to Corinna, which is proper wilderness. Like, it's off the beaten track. As soon as you leave the road, it's windy gravel through like really, really fantastic temperate rainforest and eucalyptus. And then we stayed there for 3 nights, and that was probably the highlight of the trip, I would say, because it just felt wild. Like, there's really one way in, one way out. There's no other roads. There's plenty of hikes to do. Like, even outside of the little like accommodation area is just these massive beech trees, myrtle, sassafras. There's the occasional Huon pine. Like, you visited the Corinna to do the Huon Pine walk. I was kind of disappointed by it. I don't know why. I think I remembered your write-up as being more praiseworthy.
It's the loop afterwards. We did the loop that's sort of south of there.
Oh, the White River Loop.
That's the one. Yeah, we did that. Yeah.
That's
that's the one though. I did the 2 because the Huon walk is like 600 meters.
Yeah. As I kind of got there, I was like, is this it? Like, because they build up Huon Pine as like this huge thing, and I'm sure the like thousands of year old examples would have been magnificent to see, but they chopped them all down so you can't see them anymore. Yeah. And there's these straggly ones that weren't straight enough for them to cut. Right.
Like, compared to a pencil pine, they're just nothing now.
Yeah.
You know, like, who cares about a Huon pine? Pencil pines are so much nicer because of the very reason you're saying.
And if it hadn't have been, because we did a cruise out to the ocean and back, and it hadn't have been for the captain saying, this is how you identify male and female Huon pines, like, I could have walked past a few and not realised up until that point, because they're not, like, really distinct trees.
Yeah.
But they do have a fascinating history, and obviously the wood was very prized. But yeah, it's kind of like great that some still survive, but they're not like wow level trees. I actually find the beech trees to be more fascinating because it feels like more Lord of the Rings, like magical forest.
Yeah, well, they do have that ancient, Gondwanan nature about them.
Yeah. And then while we're there, what else is there? There's the Savage River Loop, which was very, very interesting, up and down, and then you go to the Savage River. Again, lots of the White River Loop type ancient forest. And then when we were meant to be leaving Corinna, I did Mount Donaldson, which is kind of the highest point in the area, and that was a lot of fun. Again, not great weather, but got decent enough views of the surrounding area to appreciate like just how dense the wilderness is there. If you ignore the mining area around Savage River.
Yeah, and the logging that they want to do.
And the logging.
Yeah.
So from Corinna we went up to the Tarkine, and we stayed at Arthur River, which is it's on the coast, and it was a nice return. I really love the coastline.
Yeah.
I was like, it's kind of just, I belong near the coast. It just felt like home. And then we did a day in the Tarkine, which was good, but it was also very sad because you just know the roads there are built for logging, not for tourists. And then there's a loop you can do, and there's all these places you can visit and hikes you can do. But towards the eastern part, it just became farmland and logging. And it's just like, this is so sad that like the wilderness in this area is treated like it. And the last hike that we did on that day was True Arch. And it's this beautiful limestone cave that's kind of been like not melted away but fallen away over the years, and there's a natural pool. Beautiful area, but you drive through dairy farms to get to it. And it's like, this could have all been beautiful temperate rainforest, but now it's just flat land with grass for cows, and that's it. It's kind of, a bit bittersweet visiting that area. And then as you drive through the whole northwest of Tassie, it's just one big dairy farm.
Yeah.
And that was it. We drove, our final day was driving from Arthur River back to Hobart, which is 5.5 hours of driving plus a few stops. It's just a long day. But not terribly amused by the north end of Tassie, especially along the highways. It just seems very built up, and mining and logging, and that's about it, and farming.
I think there's more, but it's not as obvious, because obviously there's the cradle, the penguin cradle trail that goes from the coast, and there's some pretty interesting walks that are off that. But I know what you're saying. Like, it just doesn't seem like there's anything interesting.
Yeah, I think I'd have to plan it properly. But there's Rocky Cave. I want to visit Stanley again. We stopped in, but I just kind of wanted more time there. And then obviously head further south towards Cradle Mountain to do that. But I feel like North Tassie is probably not high on my bucket list compared to other bits of Tassie. But 27 posts to do.
You're crazy.
It's so daunting. Just editing the photos for Mountfield West took all of this lockdown to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I remember, so the Munda Biddy is 26 posts.
I know.
And that was arduous. Good luck to you with that.
Well, I'm actually like a lot of them, like, as I said, they're either 1 kilometer loops or like 10 to 20 kilometer epics. So I should be able to bust out a few fairly quickly, but again, you never know what's going to hit. And I'll have to do like posts that I want to do during the year around Perth, so it's not just Tassie overload and people get bored.
Yeah, because otherwise, what's that? Like, if you did 2 posts a week, that's...
Which I'm not going to do. It's too, like, basically until I start the Munda Biddy, I reckon I'll still be writing Tassie posts.
Yeah.
I mean, I only, just released my last post from my spring road trip last year.
Yeah.
While I was in Tassie, so... Yeah. Someone pay me to do this full-time, please.
But it sounds like an awesome trip.
It was, and I don't think I fully digested how nice it was. It takes a bit of time.
Yeah.
To be look back and be like, oh yeah, I remember that was pretty cool. And I'm sure looking through my photos, I'll feel like that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when I take them, I was like, on a long trip, I'm just like, I'll look at those later or remember those later. Whereas if I do something on the weekend, I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that straight away, and it'll be really vivid.
Yep.
Whereas longer trips, I'm like, I'll remember that down the line. I don't need to get excited about that post just yet.
Go do a Shire of Kalamunda walk. You'll be excited after.
Yeah, I've got two of those to do, I think. But yeah, there will be Perth content coming. I'll just mix it in every now and then.
Yeah.
Provided we don't get locked down too many times.
Ah, that's good.
That's good. So yeah, thanks for listening. That's probably been a bit longer than we probably planned, but if you want to know what's coming to The Long Ways Better and The Life of Pi in the next month to 3 months, you've got a head start.
Yep. Thank you everyone for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode or any other episode of Real Trail Talk, then please rate us on whatever platform you're currently listening to us on. Ratings really help us to reach an audience, especially those who are looking to learn about the outdoors in Western Australia and Australia in general. If you had any questions or suggestions for future episodes, you can email us at realtrailtalk@gmail.com or contact us through our social media channels. Thanks again, and stay tuned for our next episode.